Justin Timberlake once said he was going to rock my body. I kind of feel like if he'd seen these movies, he might have chosen his words a little bit differently. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the syllabus, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good idea of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. And what we do is basically, in a nutshell, look at a particular subgenre of horror and then pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. Today, the subgenre we're talking about is body horror. And this is one that I've been looking forward to getting to for quite a while because I tend to like these kinds of movies. And I know I say that a lot on the channel because I like a lot of horror movies. That's why I made the syllabus to begin with. But body horror in particular tends to resonate with me rather well, but maybe not for the reasons that you might think. See, body horror is usually known for being particularly gory, particularly gruesome. And I'm no stranger to gore. I enjoy a good gory movie, but that's not really what drives the movie for me because, frankly, there's lots of movies that have gore in them. In fact, one of my favorite subgenres is the slasher subgenre, and that's known for having tons of gore in it, at least for particular ones. And there's other movies that have a lot of gore in them as well. So. Body horror being known for gore is not just the only calling card for the body horror subgenre. What the gore comes from is the other part of it, which is the body breaking down or betraying the individual in some sort of way. A disease or some sort of deterioration of your body, usually fairly slowly and usually pretty gruesomely, is usually a key part of the body horror trope, if you will, the body horror subgenre. And I think that that's interesting. It's usually not an external force, or at least not an external physical force, causing the gore so much as it is something internal or something metaphorical, psychological, paranormal, something like that. And I like that. I like that because it lends itself to allegory. We've recently revisited the elevated horror subgenre. I tend to like movies that have an allegorical bent, that have a deeper meaning. And I feel like a lot of the time you get that with body horror. Yes, there's a focus on the gore, and yes, there's an intent to gross you out. And in some of the movies we'll talk about today, I don't feel like they have anything deeper to say and really do just want to gross you out. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good time. That's a lot of fun. But I do like when they dig a little bit deeper, or when they try to say something more with the illness or the disease or the deterioration or whatever it is that is breaking down your body. Now, the movies that we're going to talk about today, some of them do that, some of them don't. Some of them try it and aren't super successful at it. So it kind of is all over the map. It runs the gamut in terms of how good the allegory or the message, if you will, of the movie is. Most of the time, I think that they're really just kind of being more about the gore. But like I said, that's fun too. I'm into that. I like a good gory movie that's just there to kind of gross you out. We've talked about several of them on the channel before. We'll talk about several of them again. We'll talk about some of them today. This is a fun subgenre. I do like that the majority of the body horror movies tend to go a little bit more practical with their effects, which just adds to the gore, it adds to the squirmishness of it, and tends to make them hold up rather well. Very few of them go full-blown CGI, and I think that's a good thing, but it also makes them much more uncomfortable to watch. This is one of those subgenres that's not going to be for everybody. If you're squeamish, if you don't like blood, if you don't like gory stuff, these movies aren't going to be for you, frankly. And so if you tap out, that's fine. But hopefully you stick around because we're going to talk about some really great movies today. And then I have a little diatribe at the end because after you watch this, horror fans, after you watch this video, you're gonna have a question for me, and I'll have an answer for you at the end of the video. But how's that for a tease to get you to watch to the end? But as usual, we're going to organize these in undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level. And in this case, we're going to talk about the order of how transgressive they are. So as the movies go on, they're going to get more and more transgressive, more and more taboo, if you will. So that'll be fun. So let's go ahead and scratch that itch and get into these body horror movies. The first movie that we're talking about today, the undergraduate level selection, is Starry Eyes. Starry Eyes came out in 2014 and was something of an under the radar movie. It kind of came out, it had a little bit of buzz, a little bit of notoriety, but didn't really break big, didn't do anything impressive. And I kind of took note of it and then just kind of like ignored it for a long time and didn't catch up to it until a few years later. And boy, am I glad I did, because this movie wound up being quite the pleasant surprise and quite the journey. If you're not familiar with it, the movie is about an aspiring actress who is struggling to find a role, struggling to find the career that she wants to have. And she blows an audition, but then when one of the producers sees her freaking out about the blown audition in the bathroom, she gets a second shot at it and actually winds up getting a call back. The studio that's interested, a studio named Astraeus, is a little bit mysterious, a little bit strange, and it's seeming like maybe she'll have to do some odd things to try to get the role. And the strange things are things that you hear about going on in Hollywood, and some things you probably have never heard going on in Hollywood, hopefully, as her body begins to break down and the hijinks abound. But we won't go too far into that because we don't want to spoil it as usual. But Starry Eyes is a trip. The movie stars Alexandra Esso as the aspiring actress, and she is phenomenal in this movie. She really holds it down, and it's important because she is your gateway character. You're seeing the movie through her eyes. She's very likable, and then as she starts to go through these changes, you still feel for her, even though she starts doing things that you probably can't go along with. It's important that she anchors this movie down, and she does it with aplomb. She does it fantastically. It's a rather brave performance too, as she starts out, the aspiring actress, very pretty girl, very charming and nice, and then as her body starts to break down after she makes this deal to get the part, and she starts to deteriorate physically and get more and more gruesome and break down, it is shocking, and the physical performance that she has to give with all of the prosthetic effects and whatnot is absolutely astounding. It's a really brave, strong performance, and I can't praise it enough because I think it is the centerpiece of this movie. Now, like I mentioned, with body horror movies, the gore is a focal point, and that is true here too. We watch this actress fall apart, quite literally, and it is shocking. It is a really tough watch to see just how realistic the effects look. She really looks like she is just falling apart before your eyes, and it is unsettling to say the least. And it's interesting because, like I said, you have this affection for the character. You're rooting for her because she's surrounded by these friends that are really not very good friends, that are really kind of rude to her and not very supportive. She's got a dead-end waitress job with a boss that's kind of a jerk. And even the people offering her the role are taking advantage of her and kind of gross in the stereotypical Harvey Weinstein way. And so you're really on her side. But as she starts to fall apart and starts to lash out and get violent with people, you're still with her because these people have been terrible, and you're on her side. So even though she becomes something of a monster, both in terms of her appearance and in terms of her actions, you're still rooting for her. And that's what I love about the movie. I love that you're on her side as she's going through this transformation. You're right there with her. You're not experiencing her pain, but you're still cheering her on. You want her to come through fine on the other side. And obviously we won't spoil how that shakes out, but it is a satisfying movie, at least for me. I wonder if it's a controversial ending or not. I didn't find it terribly controversial, and I didn't read anything and doing any research for it that said it was controversial, but I could see some people not being okay with how the movie ends and the message that it maybe sends, but I like it. Like I said, I'm rooting for her, and I like the way it wraps up. I like the ending. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a twist ending or anything like that, but I thought that it went in a direction that is not super duper obvious, and I thought it was very satisfying. Now, apparently this was a crowd-funded movie. Apparently it was on Kickstarter. I wasn't aware of that at the time. I only heard about it after it already came out. It was crowd-funded and was released straight to video and was very well received. It got really good critical reviews, and as far as I can tell, people really seem to like it. Everybody that I've talked to who's seen this movie seems to be either liking it or really liking it. I'm in the really liking it category. This movie caught me by surprise. I turned it on, I think it was on streaming or something one day, and I'd heard about it, seen the cover of it, the DVD cover, and I figured, I'll get around to that someday. And so one day was the day, and was just really surprised at how quality it was. It's clearly a low budget movie. I didn't know at the time when I was watching it that it was crowdfunded, but it's clearly low budget, but it doesn't hurt the movie in the slightest. It's got a small cast and some, just a couple of locations, but again, it doesn't matter because it suits the story really well. It's shot really well, but mostly the performances, not just from Alexandra Esso, but everybody in the movie is bringing a good performance and doing what they're supposed to be doing really well on screen. And then, of course, the gore, the effects is really, really effective, really top notch. I think without that, if these effects had looked cheesy and fake, this movie would have fallen apart. But the fact that they look so good makes it a great film, makes it a very great but also a very tough watch. It's one of those lovely examples of like an independent film just really coming together and everything just falling into place perfectly to make an exceptionally good film that is criminally underrated. I know it's got its fans, it's getting a little bit of that cult status, but it's unfortunate that it's not as well known as it should be, in my opinion. It should have been a bigger hit. It should have got a theatrical release, but it's a tough sell. Again, this subject matter, this kind of gruesomeness is not for everybody. So these movies in general tend to not be big mainstream hits. And so, what are you going to do? But it is a good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should absolutely check it out. But if you have seen it, let me know. Do you like it or not? Because I haven't yet met somebody who's seen it and didn't like it. But if you have, just if you have seen it and not liked it, let us know in the comments below what the issues were for you in the movie. Was it the ending? I'd be curious to know and continue the conversation down below. But I really think Starry Eyes is definitely worth your time. The next movie that we're talking about today, the graduate level selection, is American Mary. Now, American Mary came out in 2012 and is actually a movie that I really, really enjoy in no small part because it showcases Katharine Isabelle, who is one of my favorite scream queens, and this is maybe one of my favorite performances from her in it. But the movie itself is quite the trip, quite bizarre, really gruesome, and a whole lot of fun for me, in my opinion. If you're not familiar with it, Katharine Isabelle plays a medical student who is struggling with money. She's having money troubles, and in trying to strip for the money, she actually winds up getting an offer from the strip club owner to bandage up an injured criminal for a lot of cash, and then winds up falling into being like a underground doctor for people who like to do consensual body modification, things that regular doctors generally won't do. She's willing to do it for the right price and gets a reputation for being a rather skilled and gifted surgeon who can do really amazing things to your body. But of course, there are other things going on in the movie, and hijinks will eventually abound. But as usual, we're not going to spoil it. But the movie is a trip. The movie is directed by Jen and Sylvia Soska, the Twisted Twins, if you will. They are a twin sister duo who direct horror movies, really good ones. This is maybe my favorite of theirs, and this is really leaning into their aesthetic, their sensibility. They're kind of gothy and body mod and really into that kind of dark edge look. And this movie really plays into that sensibility and really explores the world of body modification, something that I was never really all that familiar with, and to be honest with you, still am not all that familiar with other than through this movie. But it's a fascinating world, and it's one that I hadn't seen done in movies before, so this movie felt like a really original premise to me. Now, as I mentioned, Katharine Isabelle's in this movie, and she is learning about body modification just like we are, if you're not already familiar with it. So she's kind of our eyes and ears for the movie. She's being introduced to this world for the first time, just like I was. And so it's nice to have that perspective, to have her learning about this and exploring it on our behalf, if you will, because it is an interesting and strange world. The movie really treats these people with a certain level of gravitas and respect that I think maybe would be missing from a different set of directors or a different writer even. It would be really easy to make these people just freaks, just like monstrous freaks or weirdos or killers or whatever. And this movie doesn't do that. It eschews that simple idea and instead focuses on the idea that these are just regular people who have a certain interest that is outside the norm, and that Mary, Catherine Isabel's character, can cater to that and pay her bills at the same time, thereby, providing an underserved need to a community that doesn't really get a lot of recognition or a lot of help, if you will. Now, all of this sounds like it's just kind of interesting and doesn't really have a lot of scare to it. The scare actually comes from, what my friend Steven might call the normies in the movie. The medical professionals who are like, Catherine Isabel's teachers and whatnot. And without spoiling the movie too much, she gets invited to a party where some awful things happen to her. There is some sexual assault in the movie, so trigger warning for that. That puts her character on a darker path. So while she starts out by doing consensual body modification, not all of the body modification that happens in the movie is going to be consensual. That's what I'll tell you to give you the idea of where the horror is going to come from in this movie. And it is wholly satisfying, very gruesome, very interesting, wildly fun. I find this movie to be a trip. I think that the consensual body modification is very off-putting and interesting, and kind of leaves you really wondering like what drives that psychology. But then the non-consensual body modification is very gratifying in a the way the revenge movies tend to have a kind of a gratification of comeuppance. So I found that to be very satisfying. Where the movie falls short is the ending. The ending is abrupt and not super satisfying. I know a lot of people don't really care for this movie, and it's oftentimes driven by the ending. For me, what leads up to the ending is good enough that it kind of overcomes the ending. I still really enjoy this movie, but even I am forced to admit that the ending is a letdown at a minimum, and possibly infuriating to some people on the whole. I'll kind of give it a pass, and I admit I'm giving it a pass in part because Catherine Isabel is great in this movie, and I really, really enjoy her. I'm a big fan of hers, so I am coming from a position of bias on this movie. I have a special place for it, a special place in my heart for it that maybe is a little bit more forgiving than the average person might be watching this movie. So I'm putting that card on the table for you guys. I'm more partial to this movie than the average person. The reviews of this are mixed. Opinions on this are mixed. I give it the performance by Catherine, the original premise, the interesting body mod stuff, and the Soska sisters' direction. To me, all went out over what is a disappointing ending, and maybe a movie that doesn't say as much as it should. Like I was saying earlier, I like when these body modification movies are trying to say something a little bit deeper, and I feel like American Mary was kind of going that direction and really kind of trying to shine a light on a community that doesn't get a lot of light in it, explore a little bit of the psychology of what makes people do the things that they do, whether it's driven by need or by trauma or other things. And it goes down that path, and then it just kind of stops. It falls short of saying something. So I admit that. I admit that it doesn't completely succeed in the message, but I still like it. I still have love for it. Like I said, I'm a little bit biased. What are your thoughts on American Mary if you've seen it? Do you fall in the camp of it, the ending kind of ruins it? It falls apart at the end? Do you feel like it doesn't go far enough? Or do you like it like I do? Let us know in the comments below. But if you haven't seen American Mary, it's not going to be for everybody. Like I said, it doesn't have the universal acclaim or appeal that something like, say, Starry Eyes seems to have. But I really enjoy it, so I've kind of given you a taste or an idea of what to expect, and you can make your own informed decision. But if you check it out, come back and let us know in the comments what you thought of it, because I, for one, definitely would like to know what you think. And the last movie that we're talking about today, the postgraduate level selection, is The Human Centipede first sequence. Human Centipede came out in 2009 and is a really notorious film, definitely the most notorious film we're talking about today, and got a lot of hype just based on its premise alone. And it's debatable whether or not that hype was well-deserved or if it was really just a lot of hype. But it really has gone down as being one of the more notorious, noteworthy, and arguably transgressive films in horror, at least in modern horror history in the last 10, 15 years or so. We'll get into it. If you haven't seen it, The Human Centipede first sequence is the story of a German doctor who kidnaps people and then decides to perform gruesome experiments on them where he attaches them mouth to anus in a chain to create a human centipede that would share one digestive tract throughout all three people in this chain of humans that he creates, two American women and a Japanese man, and the hijinks abound almost immediately just because the premise of the movie is mouth to anus surgeries. So we don't want to spoil the ending, of course, but we're basically spoiling the premise of the movie. But to be honest with you, the premise was pretty well publicized. Like I alluded to earlier, this movie got a lot of press, a lot of notoriety because of the idea of somebody sewing somebody's mouth to somebody else's anus. That is an incredibly bizarre, gruesome, demented idea. And it's an idea that apparently came from director Tom Six. He's a Dutch filmmaker, so I guess technically this is a Dutch film, even though it's set in Germany and stars American actors. I guess technically it's a Dutch film. But Tom Six, Dutch director, kind of a weird, wacky guy. Apparently he says he got the idea for this when talking to his friends about pedophiles and how pedophiles should be forced to have their mouth sewn to the anus of a fat, sweaty trucker, I think is how he said it. Funny idea, and I guess that spawned the idea for the Human Centipede. All right. It's a demented idea, not that people can't have demented ideas and not that, other people haven't had demented ideas, but Tom Six really revels in this idea. And I can't say that I like Tom Six all that much, to be honest with you. But I do like this movie. See, there's a few things in this movie that I think work really, really well. First and foremost is the star of the movie, Dieter Laser, the German actor Dieter Laser, who plays Dr. Hader, the German experimenter, who definitely gives vibes of like a Joseph Mengele Nazi vibe to him that is very effective for this movie. This guy is great. He's just so creepy and like kind of unnerving and unsettling and just gleefully, wonderfully campy without being too over the top. More on that in a second. And then I like the fact that it's got this really gruesome concept, but the movie itself actually isn't all that gruesome. We talked earlier about how these body horror movies revel in the gore. This one actually doesn't. It leaves a lot more to your imagination and just kind of suggests the gore. You see a little bit of the surgery, the teeth getting knocked out to sew the mouth to the anus, and you see drawings of how the surgery is going to work out, and then you kind of see people bandaged up so that they're attached to the butt, with like these bandages, these heavy bandages. So it's not really showing a lot of gore, and my guess is a little bit because of budget reasons. They didn't have the money to do the effects, but leaving that to the imagination actually wound up being a little more effective. It was probably a happy accident, not unlike Steven Spielberg not showing the shark in Jaws. Leaving that to the imagination, knowing that a mouth is sewn to an anus, knowing what's going to happen when the digestive tract kicks in, was really effective. Really, probably better than anything they could have come up with on screen, especially again for a low budget. And I thought that was a nice touch. Again, nice to see a body horror movie that is gruesome without actually being all that gory. Neat trick, Tom Six. I'll tip my hat to you on that one because that's not an easy thing to do. I also like that this movie is a ridiculous idea and it doesn't shy away from that. It doesn't go full out and out camp. It really tries to play it like a straight horror, but it knows that it's a ridiculous premise and it doesn't shy away from it. It just leans into that a little bit. This movie is darkly, bleakly funny in a way that you'll feel kind of almost dirty laughing at it. But I really think that's okay. I really think that that's part of the intent of the movie. Like I said, it's not trying to not be scary or creepy or unsettling or gross, but it's not afraid to also let you laugh at it a bit too. And I think that is a recipe for success. I think the movie works really, really well. It's got, believable acting across the board. Again, Dr. Hader, Dieter Laser steals the show, but everybody's doing good work. And I think that Tom Six did a good job here. Now, I said earlier, I don't really particularly like him, and here's the reason why. The movie was successful enough to make sequels, of course. Tom Six made 2 more movies. He made Human Centipede 2, full sequence, and then Human Centipede 3, final sequence. And Human Centipede 2 was Tom Six's response to people complaining about what I was just talking about, which is the movie's not really all that gory. It leaves a lot more to the imagination. It's not nearly as transgressive or gross as the hype would have people believe. Tom Six's response to that was to make a movie far more gross and disgusting, and basically give the people what they complained they didn't get in the first movie, which intrigued me. I saw the second movie and I did actually enjoy it a little bit. I liked it because it was a little bit meta, where in the Human Centipede movie is in the second movie. It exists in the world of the second movie, and the guy who is the main character of the second movie is obsessed with the movie and decides to make a human centipede of his own in real life. And it is far more gruesome, far more transgressive, and I do enjoy that. They do win black and white, so the gore isn't too over the top. And I thought it was a fun movie. I thought it was a cool idea. I liked that Tom Six was kind of clapping back at his detractors, of the people complaining that they didn't get this in the first movie, but he didn't seem like he had much to say. The first movie was just like, hey, here's a funny, gross premise, and it succeeded on that level. I would have liked to see the second movie get a little bit deeper, and it had the right idea. The idea of the first movie giving people ideas and how horror can inspire these gruesome events in people and these gruesome activities, and what it does to society and desensitizing us and everything like that. Really great ideas to explore that just doesn't really go anywhere. He didn't really take it all the way home. And unlike American Mary, I don't really give him a pass for that. I still actually enjoyed the movie, but it was not as good as it could and should have been. Where Tom Six really fails for me is in the third one. The third Human Centipede movie, which is set place in prison, brings back actors from the first movie, including Dieter Laser, who now has gone way over the top and is basically shouting at the screen the entire time. The movie is a travesty. It is borderline unwatchable. It's so bad. And it's not even really as gross as the second movie. It's really trying to ride the line between showing more grossness and being more offensive, but also not really showing as much of that. It's really bizarre. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It really is Tom Six just kind of throwing things on the screen to be gross and be offensive. And that's where I don't like him. I feel like rather than trying to be, an artist or trying to be, something, have something to say, he's just trying at that point to be shocking. And it's not even shocking anymore. It's just annoying. The whole premise is not shocking after a third movie. You put 3 people together ass to mouth in the first movie, and now I'm going to put 50 of them together. So what? Like, it didn't matter. And so Tom Six, the esteem for Tom Six that I had for the first movie was spent. His goodwill was spent by the third movie. So I'm not a Tom Six fan. I don't think he has anything to say. He actually puts himself in the third movie, so it's just kind of highlighted for me that he's just trying to make a name for himself by doubling down and then tripling down on this premise rather than doing something else. And yeah, I kind of shrugged my shoulders at it. That said, I do think the first movie is really good. And if you haven't seen it, I'd be curious for you to check it out and see what you think. Obviously, given the premise, it's not going to be for everybody. And like I said, I would double down that it's not as gruesome on screen, but the idea of what's happening is pretty gruesome. So if this conversation was uncomfortable for you, you probably don't want to watch it. But I would be curious to see what you think if you haven't seen it, because you might be surprised at how tame it is considering its reputation. That said, the sequels are not tame, so be forewarned. But if you have seen Human Centipede, let me know your thoughts on it. I'd like to know if you liked the first movie or not, if you liked the second movie or not, and I'll bet you cash money you didn't like the third movie. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole franchise in the comments down below, because people have opinions on Human Centipede, and I think it's an interesting movie and series to talk about, but its merits kind of uneven. I think it has some merit. I think it has some garbage, and you kind of have to take the good with the bad. So that's my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts? Let us know down below. So those are our 3 picks for the body horror subgenre, but like I said, I tend to like these movies, so I've got a few extra credit ones for you to check out. The first one I'm going to mention is a movie called Basket Case. Now, Basket Case came out in 1982, and I have a special place in my heart for it because it's kind of nostalgic for me. It's kind of a charming movie, but I do think that even though it's kind of dated and the effects are a little dated, that it does hold up for its time, and still winds up being an enjoyable watch. Now, if you haven't seen it, the movie is the story about a young man who and his conjoined twin who is separated by surgery, who is deformed and kind of monstrous looking, looks like a kind of like a giant tumor. with hands and a face, and he keeps them in a basket. And he's looking to seek revenge on the people who separated them against his will when he was younger, because he wants to be back together with his conjoined twin, who is homicidal, and they're both a little, mentally unstable. We'll say it that way, because of course, all this is going to lead to some hijinks, as you know. I won't spoil the movie any further than that, but this movie is a lot of fun because of the conjoined twin, whose name is Belial, and he is absolutely fantastically fun. He's mostly a puppet of a face with kind of like I said, a tumorous mass and like some hands, and that's about it. And he jumps on people out of the basket and kills them and stuff, and it's absolutely hysterical. But what's really fun is when there's only a few shots when they use stop motion animation to move him, to have him moving around and stuff. You know me, I love me some old school stop motion animation, and it's just absolutely charming. The movie itself is not great. It's not a high quality film. The acting is subpar, to say the least. It's shot pretty cheaply. The script is the dialogue is but what I like about it is that that's heart. It's got heart. It's got some sweetness to this brotherly love, this idea of these two brothers that care so much about each other that they want to be back together. They don't want to be separated physically like that. But then, as the quote unquote normal brother, the one who doesn't look like a cancerous mass, starts to meet a woman and starts to want to do things on his own, and Belial, the brother, gets a little jealous. It's interesting to see how that dynamic starts to change, and I wish they would explore that a little bit more, but I like the fact that this schlocky kind of B movie even tackled that to begin with. It's a really charming movie from director Frank Henenlotter, who is kind of known for doing schlocky, B-movie type things. And I feel like he kind of found a formula that worked really well here. And he did make 2 sequels to the movie that are actually kind of fun too. They're not as good as the original, but they're not bad. I actually would recommend the whole series if you like this kind of movie. Again, if you can kind of roll with the fact that the effects look cheap and kind of campy, and the movie itself is kind of campy and silly, but it's just charming. It's a charmingly campy movie. If you can get into that, I think you can get into Basket Case. If you've seen it, let me know what you think, and let everybody in the comments know what you think. But if you haven't seen Basket Case, I think it'd be worth your time. I think you'll be surprised at just how much fun it actually is. The next extra credit movie I'm going to mention is a movie called Tusk. And Tusk came out in 2014 and is an utterly bizarre, twisted movie from the mind of Kevin Smith, which is not who you expect to see bizarre, twisted movies coming from. And that's because he was probably a little bit high when he came up with this story, but we'll get into that in just a second. If you're not familiar with it, the movie stars Justin Long as a podcaster who goes on a trip to talk to a guy for his podcast about weird things that happen, and he comes across this guy who's obsessed with walruses, and this man winds up kidnapping him and decides to try to turn Justin Long into a human walrus, and the hijinks absolutely abound from this movie. And wow, is this movie disturbing and bizarre and really uneven, but I love it anyways. Let me explain. Kevin Smith and his buddies apparently came up with this idea on his podcast called the Smodcast, where they're coming up with ridiculous ideas. And Kevin Smith, known for being an aficionado of marijuana, probably was high. I get the impression. I've never actually heard the podcast. I think they were high. If they weren't high, they should have been. And they're kicking around ideas, and they come up with this idea of this human walrus, turning somebody into a human walrus. And kind of a funny joke at the time that somebody gave him money to make into an actual movie. I cannot believe that somebody gave him money to make this, pothead idea into an actual movie. But I'm kind of glad they did, because 2 things about it that I really love. One is the ridiculously bizarre, creepy idea behind it. And 2 is that Kevin Smith can actually make a good horror movie. He has a good sense of dread and tone and atmosphere. He can really do that. It's actually surprising when you watch his usual movies, Clerks and things like that. They're dialogue heavy joke movies. They don't have a lot of auteurism to it, but this movie kind of does. And I talked previously about Red State, his other horror movie. He can do this, but then he always doubts himself and undercuts it. And in this case, it's by adding Johnny Depp to the movie. Now, Johnny Depp is a talented actor, and I used to be one of my favorite actors these days. He's a complicated character. But in this movie, he plays an inspector who's investigating things. And Johnny Depp decided he wanted to play this ridiculously weird as this French Canadian investigator with a literal penis nose, and just be really over the top, weird and goofy. And he's in a different movie than the rest of the movie is, and it's really disappointing and really annoying, and it's a horrible performance. And you can tell it's Kevin Smith not being able to tell Johnny Depp no and be a director, and it really kind of derails a large part of the movie, for me at least. I know other people who think that Johnny Depp's the best part of the movie, think he's hilarious. That's not me. I would have liked us to play this a little bit more straight and let the comedy come from the really bizarre concept. And the cast winds up selling that really bizarre concept. You got Justin Long as your everyman. He's kind of a jerk, so he's kind of got it coming in a little bit. And then Michael Park as the walrus obsessed man that he's interviewing is wonderfully creepy. Michael Park from Twin Peaks, and you know how I feel about Twin Peaks actors. He's given a fantastically creepy, chilling performance here. And you've got other actors. You've got Genesis Rodriguez. You've got Haley Joel Osment, who's always good. It's a bizarre movie, but everybody was taking it seriously enough and giving good enough performances to make it work, except for Johnny Depp. And it's really unfortunate that Johnny Depp comes in, and I guess you could argue it's comic relief, but I feel like the movie's so bizarrely wacky in its concept that you don't need comic relief. The concept is the comic relief. I wish this movie could have been great. As it stands, I still have an irrational affection for it because it's a movie that shouldn't really exist. I don't understand how it ever got made, but I'm glad that it did because I do kind of love it, even with the Johnny Depp parts, which annoy me. I just love this movie. I think it's great. I don't think it's for everybody. In fact, I don't think it's for anybody. I'm not really recommending it to you guys. But if you've seen it already, let me know what you think in the comments below. It's definitely not for everybody at all, and it's hardly for anybody. But it was for me, apparently. I wish that Johnny Depp had been reined in or just cut from the movie entirely. But otherwise, I really enjoy it. Do you enjoy it? Let us know in the comments below. And the last extra credit movie I'm going to talk about today is Tokyo Gore Police. Tokyo Gore Police came out in 2008 and is an absolutely bizarre, bonkers Japanese movie that I totally loved. I kind of knew what to expect going into it, and even then, I still didn't know what to expect. If you haven't seen it before, the movie is set in kind of a near future, kind of semi-dystopian Japan, where the police are kind of totalitarian and they are hunting down these people called engineers who were genetically modified so that they can withstand punishment. And every time they get a wound, the wound turns into a weapon that they can then use against you. And in particular, it follows this one woman working with the cops who is really trying to hunt down the person who assassinated her father, who was a traditional cop, but she's particularly adept at hunting down these engineers, and all kinds of hijinks abound in this one. This movie is bug nuts crazy. I can tell you how insane this movie is, and it still doesn't prepare you for just how insane this movie is in terms of the wonderfully imaginative gore body horror that is happening in this movie. Like I said, there are these characters that when there's a wound, the wound turns into some sort of weapon or violent thing, and it's absolutely fascinating. A guy gets part of his head chopped off and then it turns into like a machine gun turret, or a woman loses an eye and it turns into like a robotic cybernetic eye. Wild, really interesting stuff. The movie definitely has like a manga aspect to it, manga feel to it, but I don't think it's actually based on a particular manga. I don't know. I did a little bit of research, but I don't remember seeing that. But if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments below whether or not it actually is based on a manga. But the movie is just fun. The plot is almost incidental. What you're really there for are the creative creatures that are being created every time somebody gets chopped up, and the wildly fun action. It's barely a horror film, if I'm being honest. It's really more of like an action movie, an action sci-fi movie. But the body modification, the body horror is so gruesome that I'm going to call it a horror movie anyways. And me, I'm always going to call everything horror. But this movie, it's really gross. But the gore is so over the top and fun that it's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of like, think like Brain Dead or something like that, where the gore is just like really campy gore, but really well done, really well actualized and gross. And like, again, the designs are super imaginative. That's the thing that really won me over in this movie. The acting is kind of campy and over the top, but it suits the nature of the movie. The style and look of it is really, really cool. And it's a frenetic pace. It moves. It goes really, really fast. You're never going to be bored in this movie. In terms of a narrative, there's a little bit of a mystery that you don't care about. It won't matter. And the ending doesn't really matter all that much either. Again, what matters are these designs, are these creatures, these gory effects, these body mods. They're fantastic, and they're worth the price of admission. I felt like this was a really wild ride. I had a lot of fun with this. I would recommend it to anybody who's a fan of like action films, Japanese manga stuff, really gross stuff, anything like that. I think is this is a movie for you. If you liked a movie like say Malignant that came out recently, Tokyo Gore Police will definitely be your jam. But it isn't going to be for everybody. Again, if you really don't like gore, even campy, silly, fun gore, then this one's probably not going to be for you. If you really need a great story to anchor your movie, this one's not going to be for you as well. If you don't like subtitles, I think there actually is a dubbed version of it, but you know, it's a Japanese movie, so if you're not into foreign film, maybe this isn't going to be for you. But it's fun. You know, so if you're into any of that, or if you can just get past any of that, check this one out and let me know what you think, because I had a blast with it. And if you have seen it and you have thoughts on it, let us know down below. Which one was your favorite body modification? I liked the alligator legs. I really liked that. But let us know down below what you thought of Tokyo Gore Police, because yeah, man, this one was a fun one for me. So that's going to do it for our exploration into body horror movies. As I said before, I really like these movies. I like how gory they can be. It's usually either kind of fun and just kind of there to gross you out, or they're trying to send a little bit more of a social message, something like they did in Starry Eyes, or try to do in American Mary. But either way, I'm having a good time with those things. I hope you did too. And I hope if you haven't seen some of these movies that you give them a chance and check them out, and then let us know what you think. But now it's time to look at a horror trivia pursuit card and try to answer it live on the air. As you know, if you watch this channel, I like to answer a trivia pursuit card, horror trivia pursuit card question while I'm rolling, so you can see that I don't cut and don't cheat. And whether or not I get embarrassed, it remains to be seen. Let's look at today's question. Which character is not a protege of Jigsaw in the Saw series? Amanda Young, Mark Hoffman, Logan Nelson, or Peter Strahm? So this is an interesting question for me, because as you know, if you've watched the show, if you watch the channel, I suck with character names. I'm not very good at it, but they've given me 4 character names here, and interestingly, I remember some of these names, and that's going to, I think, help me answer this question. So if you're not a fan of the Saw series, this is going to be a hard question for you. You're not going to know any of these people. You're not going to know who any of them are. And if you are a fan of the Saw series, this is probably a pretty easy question for you to answer. We haven't talked about the Saw series on the channel yet, but we will. Obviously, it's Saw. It's too big of a series to not talk about. And when we talk about it fairly soon, I think in the next couple months, we'll be talking about it. And I'll have some interesting things to say about that series, because I have mixed feelings about it. There's some things I really like about it. There's some things I don't like that much about it. So for Saw fans, that's going to be an interesting conversation, because I'm going to have some mixed opinions on that one. But back to the question at hand. Amanda Young, Mark Hoffman, Logan Nelson, or Peter Strahm. Those are your answers. So if you don't know, you're guessing one of those 4, unless you do something kind of weird. Now, make them a 5th name. Don't do that. Guess one of the 4. You got a 25% chance of being right. Now, for me, I'm going to use a little bit of process of elimination here, because I remember Amanda Young. That's Shawnee Smith's character. She's definitely a protege of Jigsaw. And then Mark Hoffman was also a protege of Jigsaw for sure. That's Constance Mandalore, I think, who played him. Logan Nelson, I don't know who that is. I don't remember that character from the series. I just don't remember the name. I don't remember it. And Peter Strahm, I am pretty sure that Peter Strahm was the detective played by, I don't remember the actor's name right now, but he's Luke from Gilmore Girls, because you know I love me some Gilmore Girls. So that's how I remember him. It's Luke from Gilmore Girls. And if I recall correctly, he was the good guy cop. He never turned in the series. I'm pretty sure that that's right. I don't remember him ever turning. Mark Hoffman's character, or the character Mark Hoffman, did turn out to be bad, but I'm pretty sure Peter Strahm did not, as we've got a plane flying overhead because I can't cut. Sorry if it's a little bit loud. That plane is really annoying. So Peter Strahm is my choice. Hopefully you've got your choice locked in already. So Peter Strahm is the one character that I'm pretty sure was not an apprentice for Jigsaw or a protege for Jigsaw. So let's go ahead and take a look. Peter Strahm, Luke from Gilmore Girls. Luke from Gilmore Girls could never be a Jigsaw protege. He's too good. Unless Jigsaw's trapped to give you a coffee. Yes, we're making Gilmore Girls jokes here today at the Horror Movie Syllabus. Sorry about that, guys. If you stuck around this long, I apologize. But I'm glad if you did stick around. Did you get this one right? And if not, which one did you guess? Although, again, guessing answers when they give you answers to choose from, it's not that funny to me. And you know I like a funny, good answer that was wrong. But hopefully you got it right. Hopefully you enjoyed this body horror video. Hopefully you enjoy these body horror movies. Let me know your thoughts on them down below. And, of course, if you got recommendations for other ones, leave those down below, too. We'll add them to the to-watch list if I haven't seen them. But I'm always looking for a good recommendation. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you guys for hanging out, sticking around to the end. And until next week, class dismissed.